I was watching all kinds of crazy stuff. I think I saw Arachnophobia, which was also released this year.
That's on the list too.
When that spider jumps out at the end and just right here on his chest. No, thank you. I check out completely at the end of that movie when he has that spider fight. And that thing is like this fucking big. And I was like, fucking, I'm out of here. No, thank you. Get ready, film aficionados, as we transport ourselves back in time to a year that left an indelible mark on the silver screen. On today's episode of Back to the Podcast, we're diving deep into the cinematic treasures from 1990, from blockbusters that ruled the box office to hidden gems that still shimmer with brilliance. Join us, your hosts, Chris Lawler and Justin Neal, as we journey through a year where stories came to life and characters etched themselves into our hearts. So grab your popcorn and settle in, because it's time to rewind and relive the magic of 1990s movies right here on Back to the Podcast. Welcome to Back to the Podcast. I'm your host, Chris Lawler, along with the ever insightful Justin Neal. Get ready for a cinematic journey as we dive into discussions about the past, present, and future of the world of movies. From timeless classics to the latest releases, Back to the Podcast is your go-to for all things cinema. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and join the conversation on our Facebook group. Now, without further ado, let's explore the magic of movies right here on the airwaves. Justin, how are you doing, man? What did you see this week? What do we all need to know about?
First off, I want to make a point about last episode when we were talking about Adam Baldwin and I was putting the episode together and we totally forgot to mention Stanley Kubrick's Full Metal Jacket.
That's right, yeah.
As Animal Mother. That's probably what he's going to, in history, be known for more than anything else.
You say that, but he's still doing Comic-Con conventions over Serenity and Firefly.
But that's contemporary still, and I feel like Kubrick's going to be the one thing that like will etch them 300 years later. People will still be studying the work of Stanley Kubrick of this era, and he will be a part of that.
Well, right on.
But anyway, so that was one point. We didn't mention Full Metal Jacket, which of course is a huge deal.
Yeah, it's hard sometimes. I'm so in with my lights and the camera and talking to you and making sure I'm engaging. Sometimes my movie brain leaves while we're doing this.
Mine too. We're putting on a show. It's hard to remember everything.
And sometimes when I go back watch the episodes, like I know the answers to these things. Like I knew that when you brought up Full Metal Jacket. I was like, oh duh. Sure. So I know you texted me freaking out. You finally saw something and you didn't really want to let me know what it was. So please enlighten the audience. What is it that you saw this week that blew your hat off, man?
Okay, so you've been talking about it all summer, and I finally sat down, my wife and I sat down, and we watched Into the Spider-Verse.
Excellent.
And I was expecting it to be good because of the way you've talked about it, and not just you, but other people. Oh my God, dude, I was absolutely blown away.
That's amazing to hear.
I was sitting there thinking, this is the best comic book translation to cinema I've ever seen.
Oh, yes. I agree. Yes.
I was absolutely blown away. I was staggered. I was in awe of the way it was unfolding on the screen in front of me. It's the kind of moment that I love, that we wait for.
Right.
And we hope for. We want to see something so good and so well done and firing on so many levels that you're just staggered by it all. And that is one of those movies. So thank you.
I'm glad you enjoyed it, man. Like I said, the story is amazing, but what they did with the animation by letting that tell the story and bring in more emotion. There's just tons of stuff, tons of references, tons of depth to every single scene. It's got some serious replayability is really all I'm trying to say there.
Yeah. And actually, I think I should see it again because the first time, I think my kind of professional brain took over, certainly not a peer, but as a, hopeful colleague, I was certainly in awe of the craft. I was absolutely just staggered going, oh my God, how are they doing all of this? This is amazing. And just seeing all the things as it kept going. And I was continually surprised, which almost never happens. And that's why I say, we want that. when we go see a movie.
I want that big time, for sure. I want to be completely surprised just like that when we go. I know a lot of critics get it because they're like, oh, you're so negative on films. It's like, no, we go to the cinema to be entertained and blown away and taken away on an adventure. And that is a movie that just does it 10 out of 10, perfection. So did you rent it or did you buy it? And did you watch it with the kids?
Okay, so we didn't watch it with the kids and we rented it.
Okay.
So like, color me fucking impressed is how I walked away from that movie, which is fantastic. So we immediately started thinking, well, we got to watch the second one because Lawler's already said that it's better than the first.
It's so amazing.
So we go to rent it, and I can't rent it yet. I can only buy it. And you said it's worth the buy, but if I'm going to buy something, I want it to be reference quality, which streaming is not. And so I will get the Blu-ray because it's going in the collection, and the collection is for like presentation.
Yeah.
And as someone who works in post-production, it is really, really compressed.
That's a problem for you.
And so when you're buying it, you're buying access to a really highly compressed version. You're not getting access to a pristine copy like you would on a Blu-ray.
No, that's a great point because I did make the mistake. I was in a bit of a rush. I wanted to see it. Like you said, you couldn't rent it. So I opened up what I thought was I was opening up Amazon Prime because that's where I've got a few digital selections on there. And somehow my little Xfinity box decided, oh, no, we're going to sell it to you. And so now it's stuck, locked on this one device. And now I can't watch it. Well, you know, I probably could if I logged in elsewhere. But it's like I have Amazon on all these other devices already. So I'm a little pissed about it. And that goes back to our whole thing with I still like the physical medium. And you know what's hilarious is I saw a post in my feed today about someone freaking out about finding a Dogma Blu-ray copy in a thrift store today because of how hard they are to find. So I thought that was totally random how that just showed up today. And even the crazier thing was they found a signed copy of it too.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, with Kevin Smith's
that's cool.
signature on the bottom.
Oh, right on.
I mean, I do like buying the physical stuff, just like you're saying, because of that, you know, and then I have access to it. It's mine, especially if, you know, what if I get rid of one of these services? What if one of them just goes belly up one day? I don't have access to it. I do not own that medium, and I want to, especially for a great movie like this. That's, like you said, it's going into the collection. It has to be really good to end up in that collection.
My collection is highly curated.
Yes, just as mine is.
I don't buy just any movie that's good.
Yeah.
Only the movies that are for, you know, reference presentation get the Blu-ray.
So you heard it right here, folks. Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse is worth owning on Blu-ray is what Jeremy Johns would say over on his little YouTube channel. That's his top quality. That's his like stamp of approval if it's worth buying on Blu-ray.
One of the things that broke me completely is when Peter Porker
John Mulaney shows up
because his voice is so recognizable, but it was so kind of perfect for that scenario.
You gotta see the sequel. You really do. And once again, big shout out to Shameik Moore as Miles Morales, dude, as the voice actor in that. I think that dude has got some serious talent. And then, of course, if you like the John Mulaney voiceover thing, like I said, man, you should go check out Chip and Dale's Rescue Rangers on Disney+.
That's right.
It was well worth the watch. Should have gone to cinema. Highly underrated. For those of you listening, seriously, if you grew up on Who Framed Roger Rabbit, like that kind of quirky comedy and stuff like that, you should really see Rescue Rangers. A little bit darker, but not as dark. Who Framed Roger Rabbit was still kind of like a dark noir detective animated thing. But anyway, that's side note. Rescue Rangers is up there as well. So if you see that this next week, I'd love to hear your take on it. So with that being said, man, what I am pumped about that we're going to dive in today is talking about the movie released in 1990s, man. And the ones that stuck with us, the ones that we learned about later, the ones that we saw in the cinema, there's a lot. When I suggested this, I wasn't thinking of anything specifically. And then we looked up the list of movies that came out in 1990 and I was like, this could be a good year to talk about. There are some great gems there. And then I know you got completely elated over a couple of movies that when I sent you the list of everything that was released theatrically that year, you're like, oh, there's some good stuff in here.
Yeah, absolutely. Because, well, we're doing one of my favorite things, which is a retrospective. And we're starting at the beginning of the 90s, which is my favorite decade, our favorite decade of cinema.
It's our favorite decade, yeah.
Wait. Sorry.
Of 20th century American cinema, anyway. And so just off the cuff, I thought of a few movies like at Blockbuster. I don't know if you remember, but on the spine of the VHS cases, especially earlier, they had the year next to the name
Yeah.
a lot of times. And so when I think of 1990, I always see in my mind's eye, Goodfellas, 1990, because that was on the side of the spine.
Yeah.
And that's one that just stood out at me. So when I thought 1990, ooh, Goodfellas, well, that's a good start. I bet there are a lot of, ooh, that's another one.
There's a lot of stuff.
Hey, was this that year? Oh, man. So I went to the list that you sent me and I started going through and was like, oh, this is going to be a fun episode.
This is. Okay, so I'll let you get started, man. First thing that struck you, released in 1990.
Okay,
What's your top one then?
Well, this is the thing. So I kind of
And however you
divided
wanna look at it.
mine. I kind of
Yeah.
divided mine into things that are objectively interesting that I can talk about. And then I have like personal favorites that I don't care if they're good or bad, but I have anecdotes and I love them. And those are the personal ones. So I kind of have a little bit of both. So where do we want to start?
Choose. Doesn't even matter. I'll follow your lead, man.
Okay, well, here's one I do want to start with. Okay, this is a personal one, and most people aren't familiar with it, but I used to be a big fan, well, I still am, but I'm a big fan of Christian Slater. Very Bad Things,
Okay.
one of them, but also dark
Yes.
comedy. Heathers was a big one for me. Even The Wizard growing up, he was the older brother in The Wizard. So Christian Slater's in a lot of those movies.
right. Yes.
And he's actually in 2 of the movies that came out in 1990 that I love. One is Young Guns 2. Okay,
right.
and he was new
Okay.
to that franchise. But then the big one is a movie called Pump Up the Volume.
Pump up the volume, huh?
And
I'm not as familiar with this one. I do know the title, but I don't think I've ever seen it. So please, why is this one of your faves?
okay, so it's what I'm doing now. It's what I'm channeling.
Okay.
That's what I feel like I'm doing in my mind's eye. I am Christian Slater and Pump Up the Volume. So he's a teenager. He's in high school. He's from the East Coast. His parents moved to the middle of like Arizona, and his parents buy him a ham radio like you did in the late 80s to like talk to his friends back east. And he didn't end up doing that. What he ended up doing was like starting his own late night pirate radio station.
Oh, fun.
And he's in the middle of nowhere in Arizona, so it's only this town that's really like listening to him.
Okay.
His DJ persona is Hard Harry. He's in the basement and he's smoking cigarettes and he's, talk hard.
Talk hard!
Sort of thing, and he's getting real and all that stuff and playing renegade music and stuff like that. And he's got this cult following that he doesn't know about because he doesn't have any friends. And so when he goes to school, he's the shy kid, and then his persona comes out at night in the radio. And then one of the students ends up committing suicide and they blame it on him or the DJ. And so they start, like, the FAA gets involved and they start trying to find him. So
Wow.
he has to go mobile and he's, keep the airways alive. And all the other students are like, keep it alive, keep going. And it's probably a little, on the nose at times. It's probably a little cheesy at times, but I don't care. That was a big one for me.
Honestly, that sounds like a fun movie. I have never seen that. You would like to think that throughout the years, that would have been one of those things that came across on TBS, but that's not ringing any bells for me.
Yeah.
Right on. Okay, so then following suit then.
Yeah.
I guess I would go with something that necessarily I didn't go see in the theater that year, but quickly became one of my favorite movies that not a lot of people talk about. And then right before we hit record, I mentioned it to you and you said you've never seen it.
Right.
And that's My Blue Heaven with Steve Martin and Rick Moranis and Joan Cusack. And I love this movie. I think it is a sharp comedy. Steve Martin's playing kind of against type. He's got this like thick Italian accent and he's got the little hairdo, and stuff. And he's playing.
I'm familiar with the cover, so I know the hair.
The whole point of it is that he is going into witness protection because he witnessed all this crime in the mafia and stuff like that.
Oh, okay.
And Rick Moranis plays his like U.S. Marshal guy that's supposed to be in charge of him and get him to court and stuff like that. And they become friends.
Is it a buddy cop movie?
No. Yeah. No.
Is it a cop and robber buddy movie?
No. It's a buddy comedy is the simpler thing because they don't really do any like cops and robbers. There's only like one little scene at the end where like Rick Moranis saves his life. And so he's like, I'm indebted to you forever.
Oh, so Steve Martin's the...
Dude, it's like that. And I love the scene when he goes to the grocery store. He's like,
Arugula. I haven't had arugula in 6 weeks.
and the guy's like, what's an arugula? a vegetable.
Vegetable.
And he just like hits all of the consonants in there.
Where is he posted up in the movie?
In like San Francisco area, if I'm not mistaken.
So he's West Coast? Okay, because it makes me think of like My Cousin Vinny.
Yeah.
So My Cousin Vinny was the South.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's kind of where it was, over on the West Coast like that.
Gotcha.
Great movie. And then you looked up who wrote it, and you said that she's a famous writer. I didn't even know that, but the writing in this movie is sharp.
Nora Ephron.
Nora Ephron, okay.
In the 90s wrote what we used to call chick flicks.
This is not a chick flick, but really well written. But go ahead.
Sleepless in Seattle. You've got Mail, When Harry Met Sally, which is
love that movie.
a great movie.
I love When Harry Met Sally. What's up?
Okay, so
You got your hand raised. You in the front row. You.
fine example of what we would in the 90s call a chick flick, and that is Pretty Woman.
And that came out in 1990 as well.
With Julia Roberts
All right.
and Richard Gere. Fine example of the of a 90s. It's not, I mean, it's Hooker with a Heart of Gold. I don't think we're allowed to say that anymore. It's the
Heart of Gold part?
Sex worker with the heart of gold. But anyway, yeah, that was a very popular movie that year.
Yes, it was.
And my mom always liked that movie, and that was one of those movies that I always watched with her. So if it came on TBS, like a Sunday afternoon, and mom wanted to watch, Pretty Woman, I would be like, I'll watch Pretty Woman. And so I've seen it a lot of times.
Did Nora write that one too?
No, it just came out that year.
Okay, cool. Pretty Woman then.
Yeah, that was a big one.
Is that one of your little hidden gems because you've seen that with your mom?
I do like that movie very much, yeah.
Well, then I guess I should follow suit and talk about something that I didn't see in the theater that year, but quickly became a favorite of mine, which is Tremors.
Yeah, that's on my list too for a personal favorite.
I can't believe that was a 1990 release. I saw that on VHS probably right as it came out. Some neighborhood kid brought it by, so I was like, ooh, it's rated R. I know we're not supposed to be watching this. And of course, at the time, my parents were okay with stuff like that. I don't understand my parents becoming like way more sensitive about hard R stuff when I was a teenager. But when I was like 8, I was watching Die Hard. I was watching Tremors.
I wouldn't have been allowed to watch the actual version, because Tremors is R, isn't it?
I had them all recorded off of HBO, so I didn't have the censor.
You had the real version, so I missed one of my favorite parts, which is Kevin Bacon, the "Fuck you." Love that part. That is so funny.
Half of that movie is funny because of the cursing.
It's true.
They're humans having real reactions to something they cannot comprehend. And that's what I appreciate the most about that movie. What I hate the most in movies, in most horror movies, is how dumb those people are. And in that movie, they're actually being smart, but then the things are adapting to their intelligence and
they're just scared.
I don't really care for any of the sequels, but the original is definitely one of my favorites of 1990.
It's definitely a cult movie for a lot of people around our age group. All right, speaking of another cult movie.
Okay, go ahead.
And we've mentioned it before, so I know you like it, but it came out that year. And it's actually, I found, pretty obscure. Most people don't know anything about it. And if they have seen it, they think it's kind of just weird. And that is Joe versus the Volcano.
No way.
Tom Hanks, Meg Ryan.
Did that come out that year too?
Yes.
I didn't see it on the list. Maybe I overlooked it. Okay.
You didn't go far enough down, and that is because it is underappreciated.
Go ahead, because that is one of my favorites.
Joe versus the Volcano.
I love Joe versus the Volcano. I actually mentioned that to some people this recent week because I relate to that movie so much, especially now that I'm kind of at his age, right? Mm-hmm. His life gets sucked away and stuff like that. I mean, there's so many layers to it.
It's a weird movie, though. Like, my wife does not care for that movie, and I get why.
Really?
Well, she didn't grow up with it, so if you just watch it as an adult, you're like,
okay,
it's an odd movie.
But it's a Robert Zemeckis movie, so he makes great...
No, he didn't direct it.
Yeah.
He did not.
No, check that.
You check it.
You check it.
I'm right.
I'm not the checker.
So you check it.
You're the checker.
Robert Zemeckis.
Joe versus the
Did not direct that.
Volcano director. It says John Patrick Shanley. Who the hell is that?
Booyakasha.
But he did Amblin. What did
produce it, probably.
Because I know I see his name when it comes up at the beginning.
Just like Steven Spielberg produced Back to the Future, but Bob Zemeckis directed it.
I'm really wrong on that. All right, well, we'll cut this and edit.
We won't.
Yes. I demand to be represented as an intelligent person in here.
I cut out most of the dumb things you say. Open goal.
When was the last time you saw this one?
Which one?
Joe versus the Volcano. When was the last time you watched it?
Within the last 10 years, but probably closer to 10 than 5.
Damn, that's a while. It's a good one to go back and rewatch.
It just, the content went down once the kids were born. So a lot of that in the past, 6 or 7 years was because of that
Because of them.
it's picking back up. So
I don't see anything because of you.
No, I don't.
You don't tell them that.
That would be a terrible thing to say.
You should.
I adore my boys.
Oh, that's funny. Let's change it up then. What did you see in the theater? What do you remember actually going to see in 1990 that has stuck with you? Because I'm looking at this list and it's pretty obvious what I'm going to be talking about.
It's the first movie where I ever saw a line around the block, and I had to sit in the aisle, which would never be allowed now.
Not nowadays, no.
No. We crammed. It was like a elementary school, assembly in this movie theater, and it was to watch Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
Hell yeah, man. Hell yeah. Yeah, I remember that's when I started the craze of going on my birthday to see movies in the theater.
Oh, okay.
I took my whole crew of buds to go to the theater for my birthday party. And then we went back and had a pizza party and everything like that.
Us movie people, that's what we did.
I saw that one in theaters at 1990, and that movie still holds up today. We gush about it a lot. I know people are like, oh, this guy's really into Ninja Turtles. Yeah, because that movie right there and Jim Henson's puppet work and a dark, gritty take on something that I grew up loving and was like,
it was dark.
Yes.
For a 9-year-old, it's dark.
Yeah. Raph's in the thing with the camera spinning and Splinter just getting, he's like, it's just like so intense.
It's all about violence and
brotherhood and
thievery and
society. I mean, right. It starts with that crime wave.
The whole thing is like
in
the sewers, what's going on in the seedy underbelly of the city.
Parents, all I got to say is you fucking ruined a franchise that I loved. Oh, they used too many weapons and da-da-da-da-da. So what if your hyperactive kids had too much sugar and did what they did with like the fucking coat rack in the closet and stuff, and you didn't like getting whacked on the shin? You ruined a franchise that could have been amazing.
They don't care.
That sequel was so candy coated and just, I mean, don't get me wrong. Like when I saw it as a kid, years later, I still enjoyed it and stuff.
I love their subway pad. That place is dope.
They just cartooned it up too much and it just was, it's not as good. It's just not as good. And there's a reason why I have memories back to movies that were a little bit darker, because it felt like it was more real.
Okay, well, speaking of dark, we can jump off of that. But in any transition to a new decade, style-wise, it takes a couple of years, and there's a couple of steps. And because, 91 is still pretty close to 89, you know
80s,
what I mean?
The
80s, had to leave as the 90s kind of came in and they went
that.
that. And so one of
the
the transitional movies that I see that came out when things were still more 80s, but was foretelling to what is to become, and that is Martin Scorsese's Goodfellas. And it's like gritty, frenetic realism.
And violent, yeah.
And violence done in a...
It's based on the characters.
Well, it's a nonchalance, and they make it cool.
It makes you hate those characters.
This is just what they do.
Because they're disgusting human beings.
But you also kind of want to be them, because
they're so cool.
Ray Liotta says from the very beginning, that's what I want to be.
Yeah.
That is who I want to be. And he became that, and they make it cool because it was cool to him. And then, of course, it all descends into, jail or death.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is unfortunate, but they don't shy away from any of that. These are choices that you're making. If you want to be cool, you got to pay for it. And that is a movie I feel began the transition from the 80s to the 90s, and that's Goodfellas. What do you feel about Goodfellas? What do you think?
I love that movie, of course, but of course, I didn't see that one in the theater.
No,
when it
of
first
course
came
not.
out. I was far too young for that.
And your parents didn't let you watch Goodfellas?
No, I think I caught that one on HBO when it came out.
That's a hard R movie.
Yeah, I was pretty young when I saw Goodfellas for the first time. But once again, movies for me, I didn't emulate or want to do things like that. I just enjoyed cinema and a good story, and I didn't even care about ratings.
Neither did I.
And stuff like that. I just wanted to have a fun adventure. And when I saw Goodfellas for the first time, I was hooked. So I think we got a little sidetracked here, but what else did we see in the theater in 1990 that blew us away? Because I think we both agreed on TMNT. So what else you got?
Okay, another kids movie that's dark that I saw in the theater, and it was my introduction probably to Rowan Atkinson, and that's The Witches with Angelica Houston.
I didn't see that one in the theater, but I do remember that one.
I saw that in the theater, and that's a pretty dark kids movie.
It is, right? But I did not see Witches in the theater, man.
Okay.
But that movie, I have a weird love-hate with that movie, right? I think I like the costumes and the darkness of it, but it's not necessarily my favorite movie, but I couldn't look away from the makeup effects. And Angelica Houston is so good in that movie too. It's hard not to watch. I watched that movie quite a few times. just because of the makeup effects and stuff, especially when they're in that conference room and they change into which you know what I'm talking
I
about.
know exactly what you're talking about.
Because that was still before computers, right? So they had to do that all practically, and it looked so good, and it still holds up.
That shit was gross. Okay, so that was mine in the theater. I definitely saw that one. What about you? Is there something else you saw in the theater?
Absolutely, man. One that I think gets forgotten about as a comic book gem, which is Dick Tracy. I loved Dick Tracy when it came out. Now, as much as I'm a Ninja Turtles kid, I dressed it up as Dick Tracy for that Halloween after that movie came out. My mom got me the yellow trench coat. I had a yellow fedora. I even had the little like fake plastic wristwatch thing that like you would push a button and Dick Tracy would talk to you.
That was dope.
Yeah, Al Pacino as the villain in my kids' movie. What?
Dustin Hoffman.
And then, of course, Madonna was like the big deal. And I just really enjoyed what they did with that movie. Even though I hear behind the scenes it was kind of a pain in the ass to make because Warren Beatty's kind of a perfectionist when it comes to stuff. So it went way over budget. And that's probably why we never saw a sequel or talk of it ever again after that. But man, I love Dick Tracy. It's been way too long since I've seen it, though.
I have a lot of respect for what's on the screen. And I think it's really, really interesting what he did with that.
I loved having this retrospective and taking a look back at the stuff. And of course, we didn't even get to half of the greatness that came out in that year. So let's do real quick roll call. Give me 3 honorable mentions that you got on your list that you love from that year, 1990.
Okay, well, 2 of my comfort foods right away are The Hunt for Red October and Days of Thunder.
Nice.
Those are 2 comfort foods.
Yes.
2 movies that I came to later on in life but have a much affection for is the Coen brothers' Miller's Crossing.
Okay.
And Luc Besson's Nikita, which he made before The Fifth Element. And it is actually what inspired the Bridget Fonda movie, The Point of No Return.
Yes.
Do you remember Point of No Return?
Yes, I do. Yeah.
So basically, Nikita is the French version of that came first.
Right on. Okay.
So those are 2. And then Edward Scissorhands.
Definitely used to like Edward Scissorhands. That movie hasn't grown with me, though, as much for some reason. I don't know why.
Okay, so what are some other ones on your list for honorable mentions that you either saw in the theater or you didn't?
Well, I'm shocked that neither one of us brought up Home Alone that year. I mean, who didn't go and see Home Alone and enjoy that? And
that's right.
Even though that movie hasn't necessarily aged that well and stuff like that, it's still a classic. It's still one of those things that gets thrown on every holiday, no matter what. And we watch it and because we have to. I mean, who doesn't like all of the amazing comedians and stuff that do show up in there? Joe Pesci's still great. Daniel Stern is amazing in it. We gave a lot of hype to Macaulay Culkin at the time, but there's a lot of amazing comedians around him. Catherine O'Hara and, of course, the John Candy cameo in there. But, of course, another big one, Total Recall for me. Love Total Recall, the Arnold Schwarzenegger one. And then I guess Misery, which I know is a random one, but
Kathy
that
Bates,
movie
right?
I think messes with
That's a
me
Stephen
on
King. It's based on a Stephen King one.
level. And the way that my dad talked that movie up to me just freaked me out and made me very intrigued to see it. So when I was old enough to finally sit down and watch Misery, whoo, boy, that movie screwed with my head. And it's not even that scary of a movie, but it is definitely something that some people could relate to. Well, that about wraps up our cinematic journey. We want to extend our heartfelt gratitude to all of you dedicated listeners who joined us today. We hope you enjoyed this immersive exploration of the captivating movies from 1990 on Back to the Podcast. If you found yourself engrossed in the magic, don't hesitate to hit that like button and hit that subscribe to stay tuned for more enriching discussions. Share your thoughts in the comments below. We're curious to know your favorite film from the memorable year of 1990. Until next time, keep the reels rolling. And remember, it's all about the love of movies. Thanks for being a part of the film-loving community. And of course, we'll see you again on the next episode of Back to the Podcast.